Hi everyone, welcome. What you see out here on the bench in front of us is my newest worm bin, running what I assume to be red wigglers. They're worms that came from what had been the outdoor worm bag version 4.0. And when that came to an end, that system, and we harvested the castings from that system, the worms came into here. And with everyone's help, 30 people, that includes me, so 29 people plus my estimate of how many worms live in here, amounts to 2,961 worms. It's kind of cool when you get the average of 30 different people's estimates, because chances are it's pretty close to the real thing. You know, when you see those statistical informational shows that talk about how guessing how many gumballs are in the machine is very difficult if it's just a single person guessing, but when you average multiple people's guesses together, it sort of weeds out the extremes, and then a lot of times the average that you're left with is highly accurate. So that's part of the reason I like doing it that way. So I'm I don't know why I'm just holding this here. I was going to just mention that this is the food that they're getting today. It's mostly cabbage and Brussels sprout leaves, and I throw in a couple yummy ends of cantaloupe for good measure. So now we can use both hands. Even though I don't use my clean hand, it just felt awkward holding that that thing there. Not sure why I didn't dispense with it sooner. I'm just looking across here on the table. I do believe I have a replacement feeding zone indicator that we could deploy in the stead of this, because it is getting pretty worn. It's kind of cool how the worms have worked a pattern onto this thing. Almost reminds me of like a sand dollar, if you know what one of those things are. I don't know. We'll decide. We might use it as bedding. But, you know, I guess one of the nice things about this system here is that we built it right from the beginning as a system that was going to be loaded with bedding. Trying to utilize as much, if not all, of the available space in here by building it very large right from the get-go. And I believe in the last check-in too, I was even commenting how the addition of bedding is a little bit tricky here, because I'm already feeling a little bit cramped when it comes to working in here. Because the way I do things, as you're seeing here already, is that I tend to excavate, and I need space where I could stack up the stuff that I'm pulling out of the hole. And it makes me nervous when that stack starts to get close to the level of the edge of the container. So at that point, it's just one incorrect, awkward, careless move, and you're going to end up with a whole bunch of material all over the place. I just don't really trust me. I'm like I don't know. I don't think I really am, but I rather prefer to be more cautious than to be kind of careless. Because I'm not really kind of like the bull in a china shop sort of person. I'm generally pretty careful to keep an eye on my surroundings, but nobody's perfect. There's always the potential of distractions. So I like to build in a little bit of extra cushion to try to prevent the possibility of anything funky going on. It's funny because I do sort of attest what I saw the other day to this population of worms, because all the other worm bins that I run in here are all based on worms that I've raised in here for many generations, so it's true that in the past we have adopted worms that were living in outdoor systems and bought them indoors and kind of adapted them to wormery use, even though they were caught out in the wild as part of an outdoor system. But when it's a system that just recently was bought in, like the system that we harvested these little guys out of, I do still kind of expect that I'm going to possibly bump into organisms, creatures, whatever, that did occupy their space while they were still living outside. And it's usually the black soldier fly larvae that sort of sneak by, because they're not all that big, and it does take them months and months for one of those larvae to get to the point where they transform into a fly. So sometimes I do actually bump into a black soldier fly larvae. I set it aside, I take it outside, I return it to an environment where I don't mind it transforming into a fly, but sometimes I miss them. And as the weather warms up and their transformation from a larva into a fly ends, and I now have a fly living in my wormery down here in my basement, sometimes I'm a little bit surprised. And it was just the other day, I was preparing to film one of my videos. I look out the window, and there's a black soldier fly sitting on the window, because that's what happens. Once they transform into a fly, they seek out brightness, daylight, and then they wait for the opportunity to bump into another black soldier fly so they can mate. I mean, they don't have mouth parts, so they're designed to never even have one meal while they're in fly form. I mean, they can consume water. That's the one thing that they can consume, just to remain hydrated so they can survive long enough to mate. But they don't have mouth parts, they don't have stingers, they're really docile. They just kind of sit there. So even though they look scary, they look like a big old wasp sitting there on your windowsill. You could just pretty much walk over there and grab them, which is what I usually do. I just grab hold of them, put them in my hand, and walk them outside. And that's what I would do with any larva that we would bump into if we were to do so here. This is probably one of the systems where I would expect to possibly bump into some black soldier fly larva. It seems very unlikely that that might happen in any other system. Well, got a little kind of little bite-sized worm ball here. And these little guys are active. Alright, so I did kind of take a slow pace there just to prevent any sort of mishaps, and hopefully me talking about how smart I was to prevent mishaps, hopefully I'm not speaking too soon and I end up just like swiping this big pile off the table, because it is definitely resting up above the level of the edge of the rim. So guess what? I've made the decision. That stuff's going to go in as a bedding source, and in comes my supply of bedding too. And I'm always worried that I'm going to implant a worm into my bedding supply, and that worm will take over another worm bin. I know, it's kind of a ridiculous concern. I really want to go kind of sparing on the amount of bedding I put in because of the space in the system. So I don't want to utilize all the space too quickly. Got to leave room to grow. Although a lot of the bedding that they got originally is going to eventually collapse down into a much more fine material and settle. So once it's castings, I'm certain it'll take up a great deal less space. But for now, we're in a bin that still has a pretty good amount of bedding. Although for only being 30 days of age, these worms really have done a number on this material. And I don't know, I keep expecting that, I don't know. We've just observed it over the past couple check-ins. Right from the beginning, it seems like this system was like out of the gate and, you know, headed for a world record or something. Just blasting out and super productive, super fast when it comes to, or that's at least the way it appears to me, and I think other people have commented the same, so that's part of the reason I'm kind of buying the idea that our population of nearly 3,000 worms is pretty accurate, and because of that we're going to have to keep them well fed, and in exchange they're going to provide us with castings fast. So I'm trying to think, what did we forget? The food and the bedding and the grit, and usually that's about it. So I think we can backfill. Yeah, look at that. Worms all over the place. In the beginning, when I was sort of examining the outskirts of the system, just checking to make sure everything was okay, I felt like we were seeing so few worms, and once we got down to the middle, into the feeding area, that's where we bumped into our little friends, keeping themselves busy down here. Look at that, this big pile here too. It almost seems like it was the bedding. Was it maybe the bedding that they were all gathering for? I don't know. Is that bedding? I don't even know. Actually, it's got a pattern to it. What is it? Maybe I'm mistaking potato peels for bedding? Maybe that's what that was. So maybe it's not quite stripped clean of all the yummy potato goodness yet. But I'm sure it soon will be. Alright, well, before we cover up here, really quick. There we go. I do have a number of these just sitting on the side in case we need them. Feeding zone indicator. keeping in with tradition, so that the worms, it's for me, so I can always find my way back to where we last fed our little friend worms here in the bin. Although I pretty much have adopted a center feeding method for the most part in all my systems, so coming back to a worm bin and finding where we last fed is usually pretty easy. So it's just really more of a tradition. Alright everyone, that's it for our check-in with our now 30-day-old box of worms. Pretty highly populated and pretty fast-moving system. And it's always fun to check in. Thanks for watching everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.